Well, hello, everybody, and welcome once again to another episode of the Patriots Advocating Truth and Honor podcast, aka the P.A.T.H. Once again, I'm your U.S. Army combat veteran host, James Beck, here as a bondservant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ to remind everybody out there that God doesn't call those who are equipped. He equips those that he has called. So I'd like to see how he's equipped us today in a little personal editorial in this episode. So today, everybody, I thought that I would take a little divergence from some of the normal activity that I've had on the show. Normally, I have a couple of different segments. I have the interviews that I do with certain guests that I link up with and bring on the show. I also have a segment called the Back Brief, where I take certain concepts from Scripture or in life, and I give my editorial on those concepts. Basically, I'm taking the instruction from God and briefing it back to Him through you guys to make sure that we're all properly understanding it. And then I have another segment called The Devil's Advocate, and that's where I take certain hot button items possibly, but just important stuff, and I give a different perspective on it. Basically, I argue against the thing that I believe in to kind of give us some perspective so we're not so myopic and one-sided in our viewpoints. This is not any of those today, and it's not necessarily going to be something that I do as a regular segment, but it occurred to me that, in today's world, we have a ton of people who are just like me, in a low production environment with important things on their heart and on their minds that they think need to get out into the world. And so they step up and get on a platform. And today it's easier than it ever has been before to have your own platform and to, spread your voice out to the masses. It used to be that you had to be somebody important. You had to do some work. You had to build some credibility before you could get on stage and have anybody willing to listen to you. Nowadays, all you really need is a camera that every one of our computers comes with, a phone that everyone nowadays can afford and has, and you can basically get out into social media, which is completely and totally free, and there is no barrier to entry. So it's important, I think, in that environment for us to establish some semblance of credibility. In other words, I'm here speaking to you, talking about my discernment of God's word, talking about different opinions and perspectives and interpretations of things. And I thought it might be a good idea to come on here and give you guys some idea of why it is even considerable to consider or listen to anything that I have to say. Why should you guys put any stock into anything that's coming out of my mouth? The first thing that I thought to do in this sense really centers around transparency. In my life, I've always found that transparency has been what I call the titan in my life. Anytime that I am overtly transparent in my dealings with other people, it's always paid dividends to me. And I think that's where I want to start here today, with being transparent about who I am and what I'm going through in my life, so that you guys understand that I'm not some high and mighty, soapbox preaching person. I'm not very wealthy. I don't have a bunch of influence. This is all brand new. Like I said, it's all very low production. And I really kind of want to peel back the curtain a little bit so that you guys understand that I'm not up here trying to be a pretender. There isn't any imposter syndrome going on. I know who I am. I know what I've done. I know what I haven't done. And I want you guys to know at least some of that too. I'm not going to spend hours and hours here laying out every aspect of my life. We'll get into certain things here and there and certain things as time goes on in the show. But for now, I just kind of wanted to hit a couple of key points and give you guys a better idea of who it is on this side of the camera that you guys are listening to talk. The first thing that I want to talk about is my physicality. Now, I'm at the time of this recording, I'm 47 years old. And I've gone through a lot of things, the better part of 2 decades in the Army, a lot of combat deployments. I've been through some stuff physically, but I've also been through a lot of stress. And a lot of the stress that I've been through has taken a tremendous toll on my body. It used to be not too long ago, less than 10 years ago, I was a very fit person. I was working out 2 or 3 times a day. I was very strong. I was very capable. I was very functional. I've never been a big guy. I was never really buffed. I was never super shredded or anything like that, but I had very functional health, which was always my concern. Over the years and over time, And over the things that I've been through, my health in that regard has significantly declined. Coming off of, almost 2 decades of Army service, there's a lot of entropy that stacks up on your body, a lot of abuse, a lot of toxicity that we're exposed to, a lot of neglect that we're pushed into, a lot of wrong attitudes about exercise and working out. And so I haven't been able to work out in many years. I used to have very nice abs. And, I heard somebody one time make the joke, I used to have a 6-pack and now I have a keg. And, that's the situation with me as well. I got to a place where I stopped really being able to digest food. And I don't mean I couldn't go out and eat fast food anymore and drink a bunch of alcohol and, I just couldn't live like I was when I was younger. In that regard, I don't do those things anyway. I couldn't digest and still have a ton of trouble digesting just food, like good food, organic vegetables, grass-fed, grass-finished beef, like I have trouble digesting just those things. I also have a lot of back issues. Time in the Army, I'm a tall, skinny guy. I'm about 6'2", and most of my adult life, I've come in at just under 200 pounds, about $195. And so, there's not a whole lot of meat on me for a lot of length, and it doesn't take a whole lot of abuse to really beat your spine up, and believe you me, I have. And so I have a lot of these issues that come in and are really a difficult thing to battle. For me, this has become something that has really presented itself in my life as a distraction. I think to myself, okay, God, you knit me together with all this discernment and all this ability to speak and write and get out there and spread and understand and explain. And I struggle to do it because of all the physical limitations that have fallen on my body. And it's not that they've come on for lack of trying or for laziness. They've come on because the place that I've been in my life, the stresses have just overwhelmed me. And I think about, our biblical stories and some of our most prevalent biblical scholars in times and in life, the apostles themselves and people like Lazarus and people who were saved but didn't have strong, prosperous lives as far as the world is concerned. The apostles all died, for the most part, all of them died terrible, martyrous deaths, and it wasn't in their old age that they died. Lazarus died poor and destitute with sores on his bodies, dogs licking his sores, and these are people that went up instead of going down. And then some of them, of course, the Apostle Paul, to say the least, is the most prolific apostle in the Bible, and he was executed. You can't say that just becoming a Christian brings tons of prosperity in your life. And I know people that are worse off than me, people that used to be champion level bodybuilders that now are wheelchair bound with MS, or people that were athletic swimmers and divers that dove into the pool the wrong way and broke their neck, and they're now paraplegics or quadriplegics. These are card-carrying, faith-driven Christians who are experiencing a high level of calamity, of suffering in their life, more than me. But I'm experiencing suffering too. And what does that mean for me as a Christian? I look at all of these things and I go, okay, God calls us to be his suffering people. And as his suffering people, does that mean that we're just supposed to take it on the chin, or, to use a phrase from Jesus, to turn the other cheek? And, James tells us that we should consider our suffering joy. Like, what does all this mean when the suffering comes on us? Because I can tell you, it doesn't feel good. I'm not happy about it. I don't invite these things into my life. I'm not, today, I'd like to see how much I can make today suck. Can I really just sink into my pain? Could it be that I couldn't eat the slightest thing without blowing up and bloating could I just, how bad can it get today? Yes, the worse it gets, the better the happier that I'll be. It's not that at all. But when I look at the course of what I've gone through in my life and the suffering that I still, fall under, it's been a tremendous tool to bring me closer to God. a tremendous tool. And I don't think that that concept is lost on most people, that we learn valuable lessons from our suffering that we can't learn from our positivity. I heard somebody once say that positivity doesn't leave scars. And I think that's a very pertinent statement, because when I look at my body and I see different physical scars on my body, I can go, oh, I remember where I got that. I remember what happened there. But I can't think back to a time when, I don't remember every hug that I've gotten, every good physical feeling that I've gotten, because there's no reminder of it on my body. All right. I don't remember every single massage I've gotten, every single chiropractic adjustment. I remember ones that have prolific reminders, right? Certain things that happen, maybe if there was a release of pain or something like that, that triggers that memory in my brain. But I still, even then, I can't look at my body and be reminded of those incidents. Again, does that mean that we should just invite suffering into our life? Is it better to suffer than it is to feel good and to be prosperous? And if that's the case, then why should we even spend any time trying to be prosperous? Why shouldn't I just, not worry about money at all if my house gets repossessed or my car gets taken away or my lights get turned off? I'm called to be God's suffering people. Just so be it, right? Is that the attitude we should take? And I say by no means. Despite the physical limitations that I'm going through, despite the financial limitations that I'm going through, like I said, this is a small production. I got a webcam and a laptop and a couple of ring lights, and I'm up in my office, which is just basically a bedroom in my house. I got those shelves on Amazon, and they're probably not the most constructurally sound installation that I've ever done. What does that all mean? Does it mean that I should just wallow and just kind of roll over and accept that? No, I'm working to build a business. I'm working to improve my health. We work with an herbalist lady who's actually improving and repairing my digestion. I'm going through physical therapy. I'm going through chiropractic care. I'm doing these things to try and improve the quality and condition of my life. But here's the kicker. The goal is not to improve the quality and condition of my life. The goal is to improve the quality and condition of my relationship with God and my ability to witness and testify His good news into His creation. These things that I'm trying to do, if my goal is only to improve my quality of life, then I'm missing the mark, right? And I can't ask God, I don't want God to improve my quality of life at the expense of my relationship with Him. Paul tells us that he had what he called a thorn in his flesh. And we never really get any more information about what exactly that is. We know things like Paul had poor eyesight and things like that, but we don't know exactly what he was referring to when he says the thorn in his flesh. But we do know that he asked God 3 times to remove that from him. And God said no. God said, my grace is sufficient for you, because if I remove this thorn from your flesh, you are going to rely too much on your flesh and on your strength and not enough on me. And I know that God has worked that way in my life as well, where it's not, I'm not going to say that I feel good or I'm glad that He's removed the physical strength from my body, or that I don't pray and hope that He restores it at some point. But I can say this, that I am glad that God had enough care for me to remove from me something that would have divided me from Him, right? And so we have to be very careful when we talk about things that are actually evil. We can't call or label something that's evil good. But as I've said in other episodes, it's good that there is evil. It's good that there is suffering. God works everything for good. And here in this case, I don't have my physical strength to rely on. I don't have financial strength to rely on. So I have no other option in those areas but to lean into God. Now, of course, I hope that I can learn at some point how to have those things and not have them be a distraction from God or a divider of God. But if my sanctification process, if it's better for my sanctification that I don't have those things, then I'm not going to have them. If it's better for my sanctification than I do have them, then God will allow it. I don't treat this as some sort of a math equation where I'm trying to figure out how to get God to allow it. If I can get the right, method of operation here, then it'll be better for my sanctification, that I have wealth and that I have good health and physicality. And so if I can just figure out how to do that, then God's going to grant those things back to me. That's not the case. If I work it that way, then it's not better for my sanctification. Okay. If my goal is worldly prosperity, then it's not a good goal. If my goal is godly relational prosperity and prosperity in my relationship with God, if that is my sole purpose in life, then whatever comes into my life, whether it's something I like or dislike, is going to be good. Okay. And, or it's going to be used for good. Like, again, I said, you can't call it, if it's an evil thing, like, somebody that I love or care about dies, that's not a good thing, but I know that God is going to use it for good. If my goal and my concern, if what I'm working for, if my perspective is pointed at God's work in my sanctification, right? So we have to shift our perspective on the personal issues that we go through, right? It's really hard, though, to live in this fallen world and to experience the suffering and the pain and the evil that we do, and count those things for good. But as James said, we should rejoice at our suffering, because God is taking something away from us that would not be good for our sanctification. Every single time, without fail, that's what he is doing. And it sucks. How can I lose my children and count that as better for my sanctification? How can I lose my spouse? How can I lose my job, my fortune, be destitute, be homeless, get cancer? Whatever the case may be, how can that be better for my sanctification? And I don't have those answers for everybody. All I know is that as I go through things like this in my life, I count them as joy, because I know that even though I don't know how, in some way, this is better for my sanctification. And so what I do in those moments is not try and figure out the math equation of how I can switch the flow of God's, prosperity or suffering here in my life. What I do is I go, okay, this is happening for some reason. And I search and I seek, and I ask God to search and seek me. And I go into worship, and I go into study, and I go into these things to help me understand how this is better for my sanctification. At the end of the day, if nothing else, it's better for my sanctification because it forces me to lean into God instead of into myself or into my prosperity. Now, again, I will say this over and over again. I pray every day, just like Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? Jesus is sweating blood, and he says, Father, if it be your will, let this cup pass from me. He knows it's not the Father's will. He knows that. If anybody knew that, it would be Jesus. And yet he laments anyway. He prays for his will. That's not sinful because Jesus did it, so we know it's not sinful. It's human, and Jesus was fully man. But what did he qualify it with? He said, if it be your will, Father, please let this cup pass from me. But regardless of whether it's something that I want or not, your will, not mine. That was Jesus's prayer in that moment, right? He wanted the Father, his will to be done, the highest level will to be done, not his. Even when we're lamenting, when we're crying out, when we're in pain, when we're in suffering, when we just want it to end, when we're overwhelmed, we should be praying for God's will, not ours. I look at it every single day with every single thing that I go through, and that's what I say. I say, God, I hate this. I cry out. I scream sometimes. It's sometimes the pain that I go through, the pressure, the stress, the things that I have weighing on me on my life. And I haven't even really scratched the surface on some of the things that I'm going through. Again, I'm not giving you a full picture here because we don't have time for all that, but some of the worst things that I've gone through in life that have just dropped me to my knees in pain and sorrow, and I have a lot of those things. I pray to God that he takes them from me, or I pray to God that he prevents them from turning into something worse. But at the end of the day, I always qualify that by saying, your will, God, not mine. Because he is the creator of all things, right? And if he is the creator of all things, then his knowledge has to be so much more than mine that how can I expect my myopic view, my tunnel vision view from my tiny little spot down here on earth, how can I expect that is going to be anywhere close to as efficacious as the view of the one who not only created it all, but sees it all from beginning to end at the same time? It's arrogant of us to think that anything that we want is going to outshine, outpace, or in any way, shape, or form be better than something that God wants for us. The concept that I want to really kind of showcase here in that aspect is the idea of having an eternal perspective. Okay, we're called as Christians to be in the world, but not of the world, okay? Meaning that we have a focus on living here and living rightly here in the space that we're in. But we don't stop our focus there, right? Our focus doesn't stop under the sun. It goes above the sun into the heavens. We have an eternal perspective. So what we're doing here is supposed to be aimed at eternity. So think of it like this. I live in Washington State, and if I wanted to go to the other corner of the country, down to Florida, I know basically I get in my car and I just go southeast, right? I need to go south and east. That's where Florida is in relation to Washington. If I just focused my gaze, I can't see Florida from here. So if I just tried to look southeast and I just was trying to look over the horizon and just drive southeast, man, I'm going to get in all kinds of trouble. I bet you I hit the Grand Canyon on the way, right? And I'm just going southeast. I'm not looking at the 20 feet in front of me, so I just go over the cliff and die. We cannot just be focused at eternity. However, we also can't just be focused at the spot we're in now. If I can only see 20 feet in front of me and I'm only concerned about this 20-foot radius around me, then we get into all kinds of problems. So let's go back to that Grand Canyon example. I get to the canyon, okay? I stop. I don't drive over the canyon because I'm paying attention to these 20 feet. And then I go, okay, well, I got to get around this thing. So where's the closest thing that I can use to get around this thing within this 20-foot radius? All right, well, I got a little trail that's going down here, so let's go down here. Well, I'm only focused on this 20 feet, right? So I go down the trail for the 20 feet. When I get to the end of the 20 feet and I'm looking at the next 20 feet, that I can't traverse that. It doesn't work. So I got to go back. So now I go, okay, well, I can't go down anywhere here in this 20-foot radius. Maybe I can go left or I can go right. So I can go around this thing. Well, I go left first. And I go for about 20 feet, and then I see the next 20 feet are not passable. I can't go that way either. Well, now I got to turn around again. I got to do the same thing on the right. So I have no eternal focus here. I have no distant focus outside of these 20 feet. And so I'm just bouncing all over the place inside 20 feet at a time, trying to figure out what to do and where to go. An eternal perspective is analogous to stepping back and looking at the map, right? I've got a map of the United States. And now what I can do is I can go, okay, well, I'm here at the Grand Canyon. And so if I go to the right, there's a road that's going to be up in about 50 miles, and I'm going to be able to go left, and that's going to take me across a bridge and all these kind of things, right? That's the eternal perspective, where I am absolutely paying attention to the 20 feet in front of me. But I'm aiming my direction within that 20-foot radius at the right path, at the right road that's going to take me into that eternal place with that eternal perspective. That's what that eternal perspective really means. And so when we bring that back to our suffering, to the things that we're going through in life, I just think to myself, okay, this sucks right now. It does. I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. You know, I'm concerned about so many different things. I'm bordering on worry. Sometimes I fall into worry. Like, this is not good right here. But where is it aiming me? Okay. Where is it taking me? And in order to figure that out, what do I have to do? I got to lean back into God. Every single time it happens, I got to lean back into God. And on the opposite side of that coin, when the prosperity comes, and it does, and it just happened to me, something happened to me financially that just wiped away all of my financial concerns in this 20-foot radius. And thanks and praise be to God for that. And so what do I do with that? Okay. Do I just sit back and relax and okay, now I can take a nap because God's relieved the pressure? No. No, I put that into an eternal perspective. This prosperity happened to me when I was lamenting over the suffering that this prosperity just relieved. what did I do? I took that suffering and I pointed it back in an eternal perspective. Where is this leading me? Leading me to God, right? Now the prosperities come. Where is this leading me? It's leading me to God. The goal is not to get the prosperity. The goal is not to avoid the suffering. The goal is that everything in our lives leads us closer to God. And when we have that attitude, I tell you, it doesn't make the suffering hurt any less. And I'm not here to promise anybody that it will. What it does do is it helps things come into a proper perspective that strengthens our resolve, that puts us in a different type of stronghold to traverse through it. I look at all the different stories in the Bible, all the different things. There's, Job's story is one of my favorites. Job went through a period of being the most upright, blameless, and richest man on the planet to being what most of his friends considered to be, he must have been the worst sinner ever. That's what they thought of him, for going through the terrible, like, you're up here and then you get all the way down. I mean, you lost your fortune, you lost your business, you lost your kids, all in a matter of minutes. That story in Job, the servant comes and says, hey, all your livestock's been stolen. And while he was still speaking, all your stores have been burnt up and stolen. And while he was still speaking, all your kids just died in one fell swoop. To go from being where he was, God calling him the most upright and blameless person on the planet, to being that, his friends thought he must have been pulling the wool over everybody's eyes. He was the worst sinner ever in their eyes. And then he goes from that to living 140 years and having twice the prosperity in that second, or in that third act, I'll call it, than he did in the first. We're called to be God's suffering people, but that doesn't mean that we have to suffer. It doesn't mean that we're required to suffer, right? It just means that if we want to go through life properly the way that God has ordered us to do, then our perspective needs to be in the world, not of the world. Then our perspective needs to be in the 20-foot radius and include the eternal perspective and the eternal focus. So guys, I hope that sheds a little bit more of the light on who I am and why I've come to do the things that I've come to do on this podcast. I didn't get into too many details there, but I did go for a good deal of time, and I hope that's helpful. I hope that that's something that shifts your focus and shifts your perspective and forces you or compels you, maybe is a better word, to lean into God in whatever season your life is going through. It doesn't always seem good. It doesn't always feel good, but it always is good. And if we know that, if we learn that, we can lean on that and anchor ourselves to it in any storm. Well, guys, that's all I've got for you today. I hope that you guys enjoyed receiving that, as always, as much as I enjoy pouring it out. Once again, I've been James Beck, praying for all of you out there, wherever you are, that the Lord be a lamp unto all of our feet and a light to bless and keep each of us together on the path. I hope to see you on the next episode, and until then, please take care.